Doing it right. Everybody will be dancing for the feeling alright. Everybody will be dancing tonight. Doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and the feeling is right. Everybody will be dancing and be doing it right. Everybody will be dancing for the feeling alright. Everybody will be dancing and not doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and the feeling is right. Everybody will be dancing and be doing it right. Everybody will be dancing for the feeling alright. Everybody will be dancing tonight.
My name is Sam and I am the English Gamer. As you can probably tell by the title of this video, this is my first shot at a show dedicated to video games. Now, I know that the idea of reviewing games is not new, fancy or hip at all. Whether it's the wonderful folks at Normal Boots, the angry video game nerd, the master race at Retroware, the crazy gang at Hidden Block and the informative bastards of GameSack, we're not in a short supply of reviewers here on YouTube. Now, how would you like it if I spend the next 5 minutes of your precious time talking about my entire life? It's not exactly a masterpiece in English literature like the Trials and Tribunals or Street Land and Moose, but still, you'll laugh, you'll cry, whilst at the same time clicking away from this so-called review because of irrelevant backpedaling. And last but not least, first impressions are important. How fitting since this is the first episode of my show. Turning over a new leaf, am I right? Anyways, enough mindless numbing, let's get the show on the road with a console that changed the lives of millions for good, the Game Boy. Oh yeah! The Nintendo Game Boy was released across Japan and America in 1989 with a European release the following year. During the mid to late 80s, Nintendo went on a meteoric rise to excellence after blazing the crumbling video game industry apart with the NES and its revolutionary range of titles. Before the Game Boy's release, portable gaming was mostly a joke, consisting of cheap technology housed inside bricks of frail plastic, which was only fun for about half a millisecond.
A power sweep, he fights through for the tackle. You pass, he blitzes, intercepts!
This is real competition.
Nintendo were also guilty of doing similar practices with their range of Game & Watch handhelds, but with mildly interesting results, such as the first appearance of the D-pad. As the NES became a household name around the world, Nintendo wanted to take the fun outside the house, so with the creative team courtesy of Gunpei Yokoi, the Game Boy became a reality. The system's layout is instantly recognisable to any fan of the NES, since all the controls remain intact to a 2.5-inch monochromatic screen barely capable of displaying 4 shades of grey. This helped cut down its price and increase the battery life by a whole lot, giving the Game Boy a big advantage over its power-hungry competitors armed with superior features like a colour screen and even adapters to watch TV on the go. In addition to its simple design, the Game Boy also excelled in the software department. All your buddies from the NES were available to take on the go, as well as third-party masterpieces from Mega Man to Final Fantasy. The system also gave birth to a cream of new talent, from a puffball named Kirby to the first installment of a pretty successful series known as Pokemon. The Game Boy was sold unchanged for 7 years, aside from a few paint jobs and the release of the Super Game Boy. This neat little device for the Super Nintendo allowed users to play their Game Boy games on the big screen, with some games taking advantage of the SNES's unholy powers for unique special effects. The Super Game Boy didn't rely on emulation, but instead used the same hardware found on an actual Game Boy minus the buttons and screen for operation. Wait a second. In 1996, Nintendo went back to the drawing board and gave the old man a new look with the super sexy Game Boy Pocket. Originally created by Mr. Yokoi as a concession after the red and black nightmare known as the Virtual Boy, this unit runs off 2 AAA batteries as opposed to the 4 AA's from before, comes in a variety of colours to collect, and uses a crystal clear black and white display which makes it much easier to play on as opposed to the pea-soup blurry display of the original model. Of course, the most important feature of the Game Boy Pocket is that it fits all the nuts and bolts of the 8-bit charmer into a smaller, slicker package which truly lives up to its namesake. It's a Game Boy that fits into your pocket. Huzzah! The Game Boy Light soon followed suit in 1998, with no significant changes to hardware or design, but instead featured an indigo backlight for conditions in poor light. The same technology used for digital watches and mobile devices in the late 90s. This meant that the system could be used in places never before conceived without the need of a crappy accessory, such as a rave, a cinema, a car journey at night, or for playing in a bedroom to stay up late. It was only released in Japan in small quantities, so good luck trying to find one with a tight budget. A few months later, the stagnating hardware of the Game Boy was given a modest update with the Game Boy Color, after 9 dim years and plenty of pressure from developers and fans alike. As the name suggests, a colour screen has been thrown to the mix, but that's only just the icing of the cake. The system has a clock speed twice as fast as that as the original Game Boy, as well as 4 times the memory capacity. The final cherry on the cake is the genius decision to make the model backwards compatible with all Game Boy software right out of the box, along with new titles making use of the Game Boy Color's sophisticated features, some of which work on older models and some of which don't. The system managed to implement features which have gone on to become an industry standard. An infrared port is located on the top, which enabled wireless linking similar to the DS, but was only supported in a few games. Several titles would go on to experiment with force feedback, motion sensitive controls, and even connectivity with mobile phones. Released in 2001, the mobile adapter allowed a Game Boy to connect to a cellular phone, where users could check emails, browse on chat rooms, and even download and play games online. Only a small number of titles were supported, including Japanese versions of Pokemon Crystal and Mario Kart Super Circuit on the Game Boy Advance, where ghost data could be exchanged. The service never made it outside of Japan and was shut down quietly in December of 2002. So, you want to hook up your Game Boy to that sassy smartphone of yours? Well, that's a big no-no here, I'm afraid. The immense success of the Game Boy and Game Boy Color paved the way for future portable design with the Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, 3DS, and even obscure entries like the Virtual Boy and the Pokemon Mini, a tiny console dedicated to minuscule Pokemon games which I might have a look at later on in this series. Overall, the Game Boy along with its colourful successor went on to sell a combined total of 118.9 million units worldwide. Oh, hi! Wait, where were we again? Oh yeah, we're talking about some electronic disturbance, weren't we? Well, I hope you enjoyed my brief overview of the original Game Boy and its many revisions. Did you learn anything interesting? If not, who really gives a shit? So, with all that info outside of my head, it's time to take a quick look at the explosive range of titles available on the Game Boy near you, some of which popular and some of which pretty obscure. First up on the list is Tetris. How can you not talk about the Game Boy without mentioning this addictive gem? Honestly, there's really no point explaining how this game works since most people already know the fundamentals, but then again, there are some people out there who think the Titanic sinking of 1912 never happened and use inspirational sayings as an excuse to act like an idiot, so I'll give you all a quick insight on the science behind Tetris. The greatest thing to come from Russia since pure vodka laced with the sacred tears of Vladimir Putin. Blocks of tetrominos fall out of the sky and it's your job to sort out the bricks by rotating and moving each piece without any gaps to clear a line. Sometimes, you might clear 2 lines, 3 lines, or even 4 lines simultaneously to score Tetris. That's it. Nothing else. No platforms to jump, no monsters to kill, and no storylines to follow. It's easy to play, but difficult to master, and that's what exactly makes Tetris so fun to play. Something to keep you occupied during a long train ride, something that'll grab the attention of your grey matter, and something that anyone can pick up and play no matter if you're 5 or 100 years old. Nintendo initially planned to bundle Super Mario Land with every Game Boy at launch, before Lord General Hank Rogers' one excite bike with bulletproof software proposed then to pack in Tetris to make the console appeal to everybody, not just kids, after an intense series of legal KGB battles worthy of a James Bond 007 masterpiece to secure the rights outside the bloody Kremlin. Thanks in part to the inclusion of Tetris, the success of Nintendo's portable prodigy attracted a huge audience beyond what one could imagine, with adults, parents and businessmen buying their own Game Boys just to kill time with this one game. The simplicity of this puzzle has passed on to everyone, a bit like crabs and syphilis, but way less harmful to the human body. The catchy vibes of the music is vital to its DNA, with the most popular tune spawning a techno single in the early 90s. What the f***? Tetris has evolved in many different variations and platforms, but no matter how flashy or radical each new inception gets, the Game Boy version is still the best one out of them all. This here is a true gaming relic not to be ignored. Next up is Super Mario Land, another early title on the Game Boy. By 1989, the Mario Bros were already global superstars, bringing in racks of cash for Nintendo with their lustrous arsenal of games and sucking dick for hordes of corporate whores galore. From t-shirts, cartoons, toys to bedsheets and cereals, Mario Fever fiercely struck the tangent souls of our primitive society. And when the first set of Game Boys was shipped across the world, it only made sense to show their sublime powers in motion with a Mario game, but with a different twist. The gameplay is similar to the original Super Mario Bros. You play as Mario and stomp on Goombas and Koopas whilst on a treacherous journey to save the princess, but this is where the similarities between the two games end. There's no Luigi, no Toad, the fireballs are now super balls that ricochet off the ground, you're not in a big grudge against Bowser, and you're not even trying to rescue the seductive Princess Peach. You're still in control as the plumber boy himself, but here, your objective is to travel through the pillars of Sarasaland and save Princess Daisy, on her Mario debut, from the grisly clutches of an alien jewel bucket known as Tatanga. Also, the Can-Can somehow replaces the theme of the Starman. Despite the numerous changes, what we've got here is a rudimental game flourishing with unspoiled elements and an awesome soundtrack to be had. The kingdom of Sarasaland is split into 4 worlds of uncharted wonder. No, not that kind! Many of these worlds take inspiration from real locations on Earth. As you progress through the game, traces of Chinese, Bermuda and Egyptian culture are aplenty during the journey, with the odd supplement of enemies and levels based on the mysteries of Easter Island. Probopass, is that you? There's 2 ways to finish a typical level. Reaching to the top exit will allow you to play a minigame to rack up on lives and power-ups, and the bottom exit just leads you straight to the next level. But probably the coolest feature here are the levels in which you control Mario inside a marine pop and a sky pop, which are literally a breeze to fly through in contrast to the usual levels on withered feet. My only complaint about Super Mario Land is the length. With only 12 levels and 4 bosses in total, it's incredibly short for a Mario platformer, and you can easily complete it in less than half an hour with no struggle. As the credits roll with Mario and Daisy flying past the sky together, you'll feel hungry for more scoops of the lush meat and potatoes. It should also be mentioned that this game is the first Super Mario platformer not to have any input from Shigeru Miyamoto at all. Instead, Gunpei Yokoi and the team at R&D1 produced it, the same people responsible for the creation of the Game Boy's hardware. In conclusion, Super Mario Land is different, but in a good way. It's worthy of a quick playthrough every now and then, and even if you don't have a Game Boy or no longer in possession of one, you can download this title on the 3DS eShop for an extremely low sum of money, or just download it on an emulator for free, but that's technically cheating. Seriously, the time you spend with this golden oldie is way more productive than those boring team deathmatches on the latest Call of Duty, churned up by Activision with a big dollar-sized marketing for shits and giggles. Now here's Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins. A sequel in any media is expected to improve on its predecessor in every way, shape or form, and damn right does this game deliver. Released in 1992, 3 years after the Game Boy's arrival, this game pushes the system's limits to the max, with a balling capacity of 2 megabits locked inside each copy. As you can see right away, Super Mario Land 2 is a massive improvement over its predecessor. In fact, just comparing the 2 titles together is basically like comparing between day and night. As the story goes, the peaceful territory of Mario Land has been occupied by everybody's favourite garlic-munching, gas-guzzling madman Wario, who used the events of Mario's adventure in Sarasaland to proceed to take over along with the assistance of Tatanga to brainwash all the citizens. Basically, it's your task to save Mario's castle by touring across the vast districts of Mario Land and collect 6 golden coins to gain access to the castle and beat the crap out of Wario to restore peace back to Mario Land. Talk about a fabulous name. The biggest shake-up with this game is the visuals, which closely resembles that of a typical platformer in the Mario series instead of a sordid tech demo, and the overall designs of the sprites are now significantly bigger in size than before. Really would not be disappointed if he was here. Once again, Miyamoto and his homies have no involvement in this title, and that's not necessarily a bad thing at all with Mr. Yokoi in the house. The music is still a treat to the ears and is composed by Kazumi Totaka. If you hang around on the game over screen for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you'll hear the 19-note melody known as Totaka's Song, which is hidden away in every game with input from the guy himself. The gameplay in Mario Numero Dos is similar to Super Mario World with a couple of cherry-picked ideas like the overworld map, where you can explore around the island and choose any level you desire instead of trailing through a linear arrangement, and the ability to perform spin jumps to crack down enemies and blocks. There's an unprecedented amount of creativity flourishing here with a ton of variety in every world. One minute you're on ground control to Major Toad, the next minute you're in a haunted mansion, and before you know it, you're surrounded by what may look like Lego bricks, but in fact, NMB block bricks created when Nintendo was a toy company in the 1960s. It's a nice reminder of their past and also an inheritance of Gunpei Yokoi's marvellous team. Again, there are two possible conclusions to a level. Reaching the top of this bell won't turn you into a cat as recently seen here, but it lets you proceed to a minigame to milk up on some tasty goodies. And speaking of goodies, this game is crammed with all sorts of enemies, lives and power-ups. The vehicles from Super Mario Land are gone, the traditional Fireball Mario replaces Super Ball Mario, and now there's a medley of carrots scattered around that turns Mario into Rabbit Mario, which allows him to maneuver past obstacles and hazards at an easier pace. To summarise things up, Super Mario Land 2 is an all-round bundle of fun, not the one-hit indie band but just fun in general. It may seem a bit old and frail compared to most platformers of today, but you can still have a whale of a time with it, like a nice weekend with your grandparents. With the inception of Wario and a cocktail of great levels and melodies to sip through, this game is like a bottle of fine boozy wine. Old, but still tastes great even to this day. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening is the fourth installment in the Zelda series. This action-adventure classic begun life as a port of the SNES gem, A Link to the Past, but soon expanded as an original title under the creative force of Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka. And you know what? That might well be a blessing in disguise, because this game is a classic entry to the legendary series and is quite different from what you may expect from your average Zelda game. Our plot here is as follows. Link sets sail on a small boat when suddenly a violent thunderstorm breaks loose, causing him to lose control of his boat and wash ashore on Koholint Island. The next morning, a young girl named Marine spots our hero unconscious and escorts him to a nearby house with her mother Tarin. The pair explain to Link about the cause of his shipwreck and become fascinated about him and the outside world. Now, I'm not really interested about the Zelda timeline, but the story to Link's Awakening is apparently a sequel to both A Link to the Past and the Oracle series according to Hyrule Historia, a bible for all things Zelda. As the role of Link, your task is to defeat the monsters of Koholint Island and solve puzzles while searching for 8 musical instruments that will awaken a creature called Windfish who guards the strait area. Once summoned, the Windfish will allow Link to escape from the strange island. The entire adventure is packed full of charm and excitement, from the constant breaking of the fourth wall to fun nods to other Nintendo games, and trust me when I say that the game itself is a technological marvel on the Game Boy's behalf. The limitations of the Game Boy does not penetrate the whole experience, aside from the lack of colour. The controls are solid and the graphics are great with a clear isometric view. Both mixtures blend perfectly with the hummable soundtrack finely tuned by clever boffins squashing all the juice from the hardware's acute capabilities. This game is the first of many elements, big and small, in the Zelda series, in addition to being the first handheld installment. It is the first game in the series where the A and B buttons can be assigned to different items, allowing more variety for puzzle and item combinations. The mechanic of jumping is introduced, and you can use an ocarina to learn and play songs. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's worth mentioning how this game is considered by the development team as the first Zelda game with a proper plot, with the world and characters having a similar feeling to the cult American TV series Twin Peaks, for some reason. All in all, The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening was and still is a masterpiece. The curious team at Nintendo wanted to emulate the joy of A Link to the Past and completely nailed it on a console half its power. This game became a bestseller on the Game Boy, and 5 years later, it was given a remake on the Game Boy Color as Link's Awakening Deluxe, with color graphics, backwards compatibility with original models, and a few extras like a new dungeon and the ability to take screenshots and print them off with a Game Boy printer. As with many titles on the Game Boy, you have the chance to track down a real copy, download from the eShop, or load up an emulator, but really, nothing beats playing something like Link's Awakening on a real console with the cartridge snapped in like super glue crafted by God. Besides, there's something odd about using a PSP to play retro titles, and you don't feel a sense of accomplishment with a digital game collection rather than a shelf of little delights. I'm looking at you, Steam! Despite the absence of Hyrule, Ganon, and only a vague mention of Princess Zelda, the epic journey on Korrilant Island will definitely cause your senses to tingle and explode with a big smile on your face. This is an absolute must play for any self-proclaimed die-hard Nintendo fan and gamers, hardcore or casual in general. Kirby's Dream Land is the first game ever to star the adorable puffball we all know as well, Kirby. Named after John Kirby, who helped Nintendo of America win a lawsuit from Universal Studios accusing Donkey Kong as a King Kong knockoff, and designed by a fresh-faced Masahiro Sakurai donning a sexy suspender striptease, this game is not trying to be edgy, cool or ballistic, but just a simple platformer that's easy to play. And I mean really, really easy. Our tragic story here is that the greedy creep King DDD has decided for some wonderful reason to steal all the food from the citizens of Dreamland, and Kirby, being one of the inhabitants of this fairy tale residence, goes on a journey to retrieve the missing food and stop DDD from tucking into his midnight feast. As with a vast majority of platformers from the 8 and 16-bit era of video games, you must use a mix of natural and external items and abilities to kill dangerous enemies whilst heading to the finish goal of each level. And if you accumulate a specific amount of points, you'll pick up an extra life without any hassle. The experience when playing this game can be described as a light-hearted, bubbly journey. Whereas Link has a kick-ass sword, Sonic has fast, cool attitude, and Mario somehow gets away with domestic animal abuse all the time, Kirby doesn't have much to show. He's literally just a round pink blob. Or white, according to the label of this cartridge. In fact, he was originally a placeholder used by developers at HAL Laboratory for advanced characters, although ironically, the simplistic design won the hearts of Sakubro's crew. But please, don't let the cute looks deceive you, because Kirby is also one powerful mofo. Obviously, he can walk and jump, but he can also fly, as well as inhale objects and enemies from his vacuum cleaner of a mouth to use as valuable projectiles. Even with the positive aspects of this game, a big issue which I briefly mentioned earlier is the difficulty. You see, Kirby's Dream Land is one hell of a cakewalk, and even though it's supposed to be aimed at casual gamers, I still find it ridiculous how you can literally just fly mid-air throughout a whole level without losing any energy in the process. The length of this fun platformer is unfortunately short. Now I know the Game Boy was not exactly a technological powerhouse, but it would have been a blessing to see a few more scenarios packed inside this neat little game. Overall, this is a great game with tons of enjoyment, and it's worth it alone for the first appearance of Kirby. There's also a sequel on the same platform with more gameplay essentials, Super Game Boy enhancements, and now Kirby has 3 animal friends lending him a helping hand during the grand adventure. This little puffball has gone on to star in many brilliant games and anime, and appear as an all-round fighter in the Super Smash Bros. Series directed by Mashed Potato Samurai. But if it weren't for this game, the world might have never been graced with such an adorable, humble character like the one and only Kirby. Here's Metroid 2, The Return of Samus. Premise: several members of the Galactic Federation are sent to exterminate the Metroid creatures from their home planet SR-388. When the whole team becomes completely dead, Samus Aran is contacted to finish the mission and destroy the creepy crawlies for good. As the name implies, this is the second installment in the Metroid series and the 6th in the overall chronological storyline. Samus returns running around, shooting enemies, and looking totally dapper now we all know that she's a hot chick disguised as a bounty hunter. Why can't Metroid crawl? The gameplay is similar to other 2D Metroid games, but rather than acquire specific items, you must destroy a certain amount of Metroids to advance to the next stage. Once killed, an earthquake occurs and the acid levels of SR-388 decrease, allowing more tunnels to be unearthed by Samus. This makes the game more linear and straightforward than what's usually offered in the series, and the small bite-sized levels are all combined into a single large level, which can be seen as a unique departure from swimming through a claustrophobic mountain of monotonous levels. Metroid 2 has been hailed as a technical landmark upon its release in 1991, with graphics almost as good as your average title on the NES, but I kinda disagree. The visuals are mostly average to say the least, and a lot of the environment seems to be a repetitive mix of rocks and walls that can cause confusion amongst players skimming across identical rows of tunnels. The audio is, well, sorely lacking. There's barely any music aside from the occasional tremor or suspense, and the only thing that's playing most of the time is just an array of steady beats. But why should I complain? Maybe the lack of comforting music is a big contribution to the game's melodramatic atmosphere. Who knows? The final boss is the Queen Metroid, and after her assassination, you'll stumble upon a Metroid egg that hatches in front of Samus and soon form a bond together. So instead of shooting the gracious young Padawan, Samus is followed by the baby Metroid into a gunship, setting up the plot for the critically acclaimed Super Metroid. Whoops! Spoilers! Although the Game Boy's power can be blamed for a lot of the problems here, Metroid 2, The Return of Samus is decent, commendable of a place in the epic sci-fi saga with a plot that plays a big role in the storyline. This is one of those games that can divide minds alike, but overall, I think you should at least give it a shot. If you ever stumble upon this title at a thrift store, car boot sale, or even a charity shop, then don't be afraid to use some of your fat stacks of cash towards this eccentric game. Well, we're nearly halfway through this episode, and technically I've been kind of cheating so far, staying on the safe side by looking at the more fully established Nintendo bigwigs and ignoring well over hundreds of great games. You're free to get your money back if you want, but if you stick around for more, I'll carry on giving my verdicts and opinions on these great classics, and we'll be checking out many cool things including this strange device.